A lot of us wonder about climate change. Most of us say, yeah, there must be something going on, but after that, we don't know what we're talking about. And if you don't admit that, that means you're either as smart as my two guests or you're full of it. Nice to have you in, Dan, New York State of Mind. And climate change is on the worldwide agenda, and it's on our agenda tonight, and you'll meet some smart people to talk about it, including Dr. John King from the University of Rhode Island, who's up in just a couple of minutes to kind of explain all of this. And we're gonna solve the world's climate change problems in about 18 minutes worth of television. I bet you can't do that. Welcome in. Let's go to the rundown and see what's going on out there. I just wanted to mention this as a follow-up. I now see that we have a classic argument like that. Here's a headline that we saw yesterday. This is the Truckers Association in Rhode Island asking about the governor's toll plan and asking for a public records, cough up. They're demanding all sorts of data from the Department of Transportation, including but not limited to, where, Governor, do you want to put the tolls for the trucks, and how much do you project the revenue to be from those tolls from the trucks? And of course, they want to set up, the governor does, through her Roadworks program, wants to set up this entire authority outside the general fund auspices to get this whole thing done. Today, another article in, actually it might be the same article that was, it's yesterday and today's thing, but here's the script of the piece, and tucked inside is this argument from the governor's spokesperson over this concept of cough it up, tell us what you want, tell us what the tolls are. She said, well, we have to pass legislation to have authority to assess user fees. Then we would make final determinations in consultation with the feds about the locations of the gantries, the tolls, and enter into a memorandum of understanding with the federal government. Then we can commission the investment-grade traffic study, and finally we can secure financing. But the Truckers Association says, well, wait a second, you must know where you want to put these. Bill Fisher spoke with us yesterday.
We firmly believe that the administration knows exactly where they want to put them. If they didn't know where they were going to put the tolls, there's no way they could base revenue projections to repay the bonds.
See, I'm not as certain about that.
Let's put that information out there so that small businesses can understand, how many times they're going to get pinged.
So here's the classic chicken or the egg. We're going to have a General Assembly that's going to be presented with this plan once again by the governor. And the argument is going to be, well, how can we pass it without knowing where you want to hit us on the tolls? And they're going to say, we can't figure out where we want to hit us on the tolls unless you pass it, because that's the way the process works. Somewhere between those two concepts is the truth. Why can't we get a projection? Why can't we get a possible scenario about the tolls without locking them in? Kind of like an estimate of some kind. This is not a functional conversation, and it's $1 billion proposal. And now we go to the little stuff that's making a big noise. The dancing cop has been canceled. Well, here was the first headline, right? So, of course, the dancing cop was canceled in Providence, and then East Providence says, hey, maybe you come on over here to dance. And here's where the conversation was at press time.
The nationally known dancing cop could be gracing a different intersection this holiday season.
I didn't choose East Providence, they chose me.
Tony Lepore was contracted by the Providence Police Department every holiday season to perform and direct traffic leading up to Christmas. But the department cut ties after Lepore boycotted and protested a local Dunkin' Donuts because an employee handed an officer a coffee cup with Black Lives Matter written on it. Officials say Lepore gave the inaccurate impression he represented the department. Lepore says the day he was fired, the East Providence mayor called him that evening.
Well, we sat down and everything sounded great. It was ready to go, but he said I have to bring it in front of the council.
Lepore says he already has plans in place for East Providence. He would start December 10th at the intersection near City Hall from noon to 1:30 every day through Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve, I wear a Santa hat and I pass out candy canes to the children.
But this plan is all contingent upon the approval of the East Providence City Council.
You never know. In these situations, you never know.
The newly named Rhode Island dancing cop says if East Providence doesn't work out, he's willing to show off his moves to whoever else comes calling.
And anybody in Rhode Island that wants me to come into that town, just give me a call.
Yeah, it's getting tougher and tougher. Here's the follow-up headline. Yes, they killed it. Too much heat in the kitchen. A handful of Black Lives Matters types of protesters have committed to chasing the dancing cop around this holiday season and make life miserable for him and anybody that enjoys his routine. This thing has gotten completely out of control. But let's not think the dancing cop is an innocent victim of all of this. Look, he has a First Amendment right, and he's exercised it. What he didn't project, I guess, is that it would affect his dancing cop status. You know, he's the one who called for the firing of that young lady, 17 years of age, who wrote Black Lives Matter on the coffee cup. That's provocative. And now he's all about Santa. You know, like, oh, I'm just this meek, mild little. No, he started the, how would you say, reaction to an adolescent who acted out. And now the Black Lives Matter folks, not all of them, but some of them, are a circus act. And the whole thing has gotten completely out of control. My guess is that the dancing cop will be getting very little, if any, work this holiday season. What would be nice is if we could have some dialogue between the two groups to better understand each other and move on, you know, kind of grow as a community. Maybe they should just think about Giving Tuesday, which is what today is. Black Friday, Cyber Monday, this is Giving Tuesday. Isn't that nice? A little bit on that. Here's a headline, and here's a little explanation.
And from Black Friday and Cyber Monday to Giving Tuesday, today is a global day dedicated to giving back. The idea started at the 92nd Street Y in Manhattan 3 years ago. After several days of shopping, they wanted people to refocus on giving. The movement now has 40,000 partners worldwide, and it's raised more than $86 million.
Well, you know what? It's a nice concept, and it's nice to think about it on the first day of Advent, which is today. Get your Advent calendars. You know, we haven't had one in our house for a while. I'm going to pick one up this week. Bring the season in. All right, speaking of seasons, they change, and so do climates and temperatures and everything else. And past that, I have to admit, I'm not exactly sure about all this. Headline from the conversations going on across the world, and here's a CBS summary of what's happening.
We have come to Paris to show our resolve. What greater rejection of those who would tear down our world than marshaling our best efforts to save it.
On the climate front, during the summit, the president has met with leaders of the world's other top polluters. The goal, get 147 countries to reduce carbon emissions enough to keep global warming below 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the level some scientists believe would prevent natural disasters like floods and droughts.
This is how we're going to solve this challenge, together. And that's at the heart of what we're trying to accomplish here in Paris.
Heavy smog in Beijing today is a sign of the hard work still needed. It looks like nighttime in this video, but it's the middle of the day in the city's business district. Schools in the Chinese capital were ordered to keep students indoors as today's record-breaking air pollution soared 35 times government-regulated safety levels.
Dr. John King has been at URI for how many? 30 plus years?
30 plus, yep.
Congratulations on that. You know all about this stuff?
Yes, I do.
That's good, because no one else does. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for inviting me.
What is your gut check, just for this segment, on what's been happening in Europe this week?
This is kind of make or break time for the whole issue of climate change. If they don't come out with a strong agreement that reduces the or at least tries to stabilize the amount of greenhouse gases that we have in the atmosphere, there's no chance that we're going to get a handle on this. And the projections that we have to keep it below 3.6 Fahrenheit are going to go out the window. That's predicated on urgent action right now.
All right, so you are one of the many scientists who absolutely confirm that this is a real problem. This is not a figment of anybody's imagination. This is not a wives' tale. This is not a myth. This is real.
Yeah, to put it in context, you know, we sort of have talked about international terrorism, and at the same time we're talking about global climate change. If you want to, you know, parameterize it in terms of what ends up killing more people, it's climate change and the effects of droughts and food shortages. You know, not to be trivialize what happened in Paris, but every time they get one of these massive heat waves in Europe these days, many more people died in that terrorist attack.
All right, we'll leave it there and come back and dig in a little bit. That gives you some food for thought. Stay with us. Oh, there we are. I would thought maybe we might see some video there coming into the second segment. Why don't we roll some of the video that I want to discuss here? One of 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 videos. Dr. King, what this is obviously is a website that I'm looking at here. Tell me what this website is and how people can use it.
Well, there's a couple of websites available. One is the Rhode Island climatechange.org website that talks about what the impacts of global climate change are in Rhode Island. You know, global climate change is sort of a esoteric concept until you get into the specifics of what it's going to do in your own backyard. And you can go to that website and they categorize various things like sea level rise and the potential impacts of sea level rise, the impacts of storms. Basically, we're going to get more frequent and intense storms as due to the fact that the warmer water in the oceans will produce more intense hurricanes. And you know, the general warming is going to have an impact on ice sheets that are on land. When ice sheets on land melt, the water goes back into the oceans and the sea level rises. And the rate at which it rises has accelerated recently, and it seems like it's going to accelerate even further in the future. And since we're the ocean state, we're going to get a lot more ocean from both of these things. And
okay. Interesting. And what am I looking at right here?
Well, this is
the Metropolitan Rhode Island Providence area.
Yeah, these are different scenarios that have been put together by a group of scientists that are at URI and at the Coastal Resources Management Council to predict what will happen in various sea level rise and storm scenarios. And the worst case scenario is you take the 100-year storm like the hurricane of 1938, which produces about 13 feet of storm surge. That's a sea level rise that's immediate of 13 feet. And then you put 1 foot, 3 feet, 5 feet of sea level rise on top of that, and you kind of see your worst case scenario for Rhode Island. And they show the various pieces of land now that are going to go underwater in these different scenarios. And in the worst case, which is the 100-year storm with 5 feet of sea level rise, it's surprising how much is underwater. Towns like Warren and Barrington don't look the same.
Temporarily?
Well, the 5 feet of sea level rise, that's permanent. The storm would be temporary. But still, you know, the cumulative impact of these two things is pretty devastating. Whenever you get a storm like that, due to wave action and the actual rise in water level, things get pretty well wiped clean. Structures that were there are no longer there. So when you look at that map, if it's underwater, it's kind of tantamount to it's gone.
All right, so now that you've scared the hell out of everybody, what is the answer?
Well, there's no simple answer. The best thing that we can do is right now, we'll talk about greenhouse gases. You know, CO2 is a greenhouse gas. Mm-hmm. It affects the heat balance of the atmosphere by trapping sunlight. You know, like the pane of glass in a greenhouse, the sunlight passes through on the way in, it gets absorbed by surfaces, and then it gets re-radiated at a larger size, and then the glass traps it. It can't get out, and it just bounces around inside the greenhouse. CO2 functions like that, like the glass in the greenhouse in our atmosphere, so it traps heat. So the more CO2 we get, the more warming we get. So the simple answer is we have to limit the amount of greenhouse gases to the extent that we can.
Greenhouse gases are created by?
Well, greenhouse gases are created by burning of fossil fuels, by agriculture. The two that we spend most of our time talking about are carbon dioxide and methane. Carbon dioxide, burning coal, burning oil, that produces a lot of CO2. Methane, agriculture produces a lot of methane.
Meaning cows passing wind?
That's one aspect.
I mean, I read a fascinating article about
Yes,
that,
yeah.
that the beef industry is actually not helping this.
Yes.
And America's propensity to want to eat burgers is causing a lot of cows to be doing their thing, and they're passing wind, and that ain't helping. Is that far-fetched, or is that true?
That's true. Rice agriculture produces a lot of methane, and oil and gas industry. When you're recovering the oil, a lot of the times you'll just see a flare, and that's the methane burning. Well, it doesn't burn completely. A lot of it just escapes into the atmosphere.
All right, listen, I sometimes I meet guests and say, boy, I wish you'd come back like 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 more times, which is what category you're in, because this is fascinating, and I need, and this viewership needs to get up to speed. Talk to me about the event this week and the politics of it, and what you think about what's being said globally.
Yeah.
The president, India, China, big players in this conversation.
Yeah, the way to frame it is, right now we're number 2 in terms of how much CO2 we put in the atmosphere. China is far and away number 1, and India is number 3. But if you look at the long term, U.S. has put more into the atmosphere than anybody over the last 150 years. We're sort of the champs, and if you look at it on a per capita basis, we are far and away number 1. Our lifestyle produces a lot of greenhouse gases. But the bottom line is that we probably, although we're number 2, we need to be number 1 in terms of leadership on this thing, because China and India are not highly incentivized. They're taking the position that we're developing nations. You're already developed. You have your nice lifestyle. Now you're telling us that we can't do what we need to do to get that lifestyle.
Can we turn this thing around
I think
any kind of short order?
I think we need to in short order. It's, we've kind of been kicking the can down the road on this.
What is short order? Is it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? What is it?
We probably need to address it immediately and get something done in this decade.
And give me an example of what has to be done in this decade.
Well, right now I think the significant things are, China and the U.S. have agreed in principle to undertake major reductions in CO2. So we've persuaded China to actually...
But what does that mean for me and you on an everyday basis? What do we have to give up, or what are we going to miss?
Well, a lot of our emissions come from coal-fired power plants. So, with all due respect to West Virginia, we're going to get away from coal. We're already switching over to natural gas. That's a stopgap measure. We need to get into renewables big time.
All right. Give me your 30-second summary on where we are right now and what's happening.
Well, I think we're kind of at the cusp of a major decision point. We need to get serious about this, and there's a lot of momentum now to actually get serious about this for the first time. But all these proposals in Paris, they're voluntary. They're not mandatory. And the proof is going to be in the implementation of what people propose. It sort of looks good, but whether there's follow-through or not is the key question.
All right. Well, thank you for your expertise. Come back, because this is going to be an ongoing conversation.
Sure.
Dr. John King from URI. When we come back, a local activist perspective on this. Stay with us. All right, off Professor King's scientific discussion, let's talk to Greg Gerritt, who is a longtime activist on issues of the environment and beyond. This is your website, Greg, correct?
This is the Environment Council's website, yep.
Okay, the Environment Council is what?
It is a coalition of all the environmental groups in the state. You have Save the Bay, Clean Water Action, Sierra Club, Audubon, Nature Conservancy, and about 60 organizations, including some of the small ones.
Get to it. You're always welcome here, and I'd like to have you on for a longer. We're trying to pack a lot in tonight. What's your overall take on both the science and the politics going on right now?
The science is very clear. We need to basically stop using fossil fuels and reforest the planet very quickly if we're going to avoid extraordinarily damaging situations. The politics of it is Exxon admits they lied, and many people in the United States have bought the lie, and now that Exxon said that they lied, they still buy the lie.
What is the lie?
The lie is that fossil fuel burning won't cause greenhouse gases and won't cause climate change. You know, Exxon has done much to prevent people from talking about it.
This is all a one corporation issue for you?
No, it's not, because Exxon, you know, just is the most obvious, but, you know, the Koch brothers are, you know, they're politically in strange places, but they own Chesapeake Energy, and they basically are fighting climate change legislation because they sell oil.
Meaning then that what, Republicans in Washington
have been bought by the Koch brothers' money. They said we're going to spend $889 million in this election cycle, and that's to elect a Congress that denies scientific reality. I mean, and refuses to govern based on, you know, people, you know, floods, hurricanes, droughts. I mean, California's drought is clearly a climate issue. The war in the Middle East, Syria, the war started when there was a drought like they haven't seen in 5,000 years. I mean, this is what's going on. It's destroying things all over the world, and the United States' political system, dominated by money, has made it extremely difficult to actually do the things that we know need to be done.
All right. What do you want Rhode Islanders to think about and do? I mean, clearly, we're short on time, and I want you to be able to get some of this stuff off your chest. We need to have some debate on this going forward. But what do you want Rhode Islanders and folks in Massachusetts watching this show to be thinking about?
One is start using more alternative energy. The renewables, solar and wind, can handle almost everything we need to do. The Acadia Center has said we do not need new gas infrastructure to meet our energy needs. So we should stop trying to build these new pipelines, stop trying to build new fossil fuel facilities of any kind, and really support renewables. Massachusetts, the solar tax credits are running out again. I mean, when do they, like, you know, we subsidize oil massively. In fact, most of the American military is a subsidy to the oil companies. We need to start to pay, you know, level that playing field and really do renewables. We need to really think about our agriculture and how we build, because carbon can be stored in the soil in large quantities. We need to start to rebuild our soil rather than spray our farms with chemicals.
How much do you think the average viewer, and I mean that respectfully, thinks about this stuff?
I think they all think about it some. Not huge amounts. I mean, I know I think about it a lot, but you know, they all, you know, see the weather reports. They all know about the drought in California. They all see the hurricanes. They may not know about the droughts in the Middle East or the Russian fires that were climate-induced that started the Arab Spring. But these things are starting to get everywhere. And maybe the United States were a little behind most of the industrial world on this, but everywhere in the world, people are thinking about it, and they're starting to think about it not only as an issue of science, but as an issue of justice.
All right, you've laid the groundwork for further discussion. Good to see you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. We ran out of time, but if you disagree, let us know. We'll see you tomorrow night and on the radio tomorrow at noon. Bye-bye.